All right.
Only 20 minutes into it. Cool. So, Nick, I was thinking I figured this topic is so broad. I think I mentioned it before that we just start talking, and I'll jot notes down as we go. You can keep an eye on chat as well and kind of see if there are specific questions. Ideally, this will be kind of like one of the brain dumps that we've been doing on some of the other topics. So rather than like spend the whole time debating or arguing or clarifying or whatever, I just want to hear what people, what thoughts come to mind when you're thinking of like player classes and what's important to you when you're thinking of classes, class definition, the role of classes, lack of homogeneity, blah 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 blah, player classes as they apply to NPCs, all of that. So anything you guys have, just go for it. I'll try to keep up. I may have to scroll up a bit, but if you've been to the other ones of these, you know the deal.
I guess I could start with one. Classes that create interesting synergies with other classes.
Classes that create interesting synergies with other classes. Right on. Teacher says, I enjoy class trifecta. The Holy Trinity.
What about the quaternity?
True. I've had some wonderful weeks and months of debate in this area, especially when we were first working on DC. Defensive targeting, multi-classing. So some of the ones that come up as like a question, I think I'll accept that. Move free, we'll put it in and we'll have a question there and we'll know it's a topic. I think that is fair. Multi-classing. Classing. Defensive targeting. You're referencing Vanguard, right? Classes that are completely unique as compared to other classes in the game. I'm not going to lie to you, looking at this brown texture in the background on this building has me so hyped right now. Let's see. Classes have to have a unique ability. It's nice to always have a spot in a group and not have to be, not have to have every class be a jack of all trades, requiring a rogue to get into a certain part of the dungeon. Hey, Jasmine. I like your dog walking pants. Those are pretty sexy. I got covered in mud today. It's raining and we decided to take the dog out anyway. Oh man. So gross. Let's see. Nick, if you want to read some out as well, what I'll do is, if I don't know, will that work though? Yeah, because if you read it out, then I'll just wind up repeating it as I'm typing it, maybe, but it's already in my brain then.
All right.
Or maybe we'll wind up talking over each other if we do that. So I'll just blab. Shadowbane had a great idea of mobs dropping rare class runes to unlock a class on your account. That is, wow, okay.
Do you think so? Nils is asking an interesting question about should stats be obfuscated basically, should players know how the stats work? My belief is that there should be some obfuscation, but not complete. Like there should be some descriptions for sure of like how, what certain stats do, but there shouldn't be like the formulas, out there, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, and so that's come up a few times, especially recently. And you've been consistent on your answer there. I agree. There, I would be curious to continue to gauge the sort of temperature in the crowd on that one. But I think a degree of obfuscation and just playing around with things. I don't know. It's almost like a bit of a game. It's weird. I don't have a better answer. Classes needing unique buffs from other classes to perform top end. Yeah, I guess what I mean by it being a game is there's a bit of a tease, right? There's a bit of a, and there's some room for people to continue to guess and try to figure out, all right, is that how that actually works? Part of me feels like if we're super confident with the way that everything works, why would we do that? But on the other hand, I think there is something to it's, I'll use a really bad analogy. If you're going to a really great restaurant, maybe you don't want to see how the sausage is made. You can guess, you can play around with it, but it's not like you're gonna, basically be handed a recipe for the food at the end of it. Maybe that's a shitty analogy. Defensive targeting is such a great thing. I know it's come up a few times in the VODs as well. In talking about Vanguard.
Even Bill Fisher was talking about how much he liked that, I think.
Yep. Yeah, we talked about it. Was it the one where there was all three of them?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Nils, what are your thoughts on what Nick just said, since you asked the question? Okay. Ticon said classes are allowed to be different. Homogenization goes against class fantasy. Some classes should be able to do things better than others.
Another one that I was thinking about was unique resources for various classes, like just for example, like rage, energy, mana, etc.
Unique resources?
Yeah.
Going back up. Let's see. Strength in solo versus group versus raid setting. All right, so strengths in solo versus group versus raid settings. Do you want there to be a value in all stats for all classes? Should a warrior get any value whatsoever from charisma? So let's see. Should all classes get value from all stats?
It's an interesting question. I think it'll certainly be like a niche thing, right? Because in most circumstances, you're going to be wanting like your primary stats, but I don't know. Maybe it's feasible.
Malkir said, hybrid style classes that can fill in other roles. DPS that saves the party with heals or tank pet. So examples. What else we got here? All classes available to one character is pretty cool, so you can explore the whole world with one avatar. Final Fantasy 14 does this, so we'll put it on here. Classes available to, or available on one character.
Clearly, Nils, that negative charisma should be affecting taunt. They should be hating you so much. We have such low charisma that your taunt is super effective.
Then we're going back to the obfuscation topic, kind of like how EQ, you never got the exact numbers for mana, but people would just use calculator outside of the game to see. Yeah, it's funny if you watch like John Troy's VOD, he's talking about assuming certain things worked a certain way, and then as soon as he got on the team, he immediately was like digging in and trying to get the formulas and proving whether or not he had it figured out. Buff stacking overlap, certainly a thing. Buff stacking / overlap. Certainly a thing. Velfaster said, Fisher said, paraphrasing, it was his greatest achievement. Yeah. I could see him saying that. I need to get Fisher back on soon. I wonder how he's doing. Stacking overlap, certainly a thing. Even WoW had Y2K-esque issues with number of buff slots. Cool. What's up, Shaka? Ordis said, hiding data from players really only penalizes people who are in smaller guilds who have less time to play the game. Large guilds with players that have lots of time to test things out will figure out the numbers, and if everybody else is lucky, then they'll share. Otherwise, they'll keep it to themselves to get an edge. Ordis, it's interesting you say that. Now, do you feel... Does anybody feel there's kind of some value there, though? Right? I kind of, as you say that, and I read it as a bit of a negative, not saying you're being negative, but I see that as like it only penalizes people in smaller guilds. But to me, that immediately then brought to mind like those days of the people on the leading edge really pushing and then guarding certain secrets, and then when they finally came out, it was like, oh, delicious. You know, there's some extra. It was cool to see that then information work its way out into the rest of the world. I don't know. Never liked having a bunch of resources outside of endurance and mana, Rule said. So we'll put that in a different way. We'll say limiting resources to something simpler like endurance and mana. Okay. Bonnie said get good. I like the idea of EQ2 Bard Chanters having way more group buffs than you can maintain, like concentration depending on the situation. You would maintain a different setup. So, example EQ2 Bard Chanters having way more group buffs than you can maintain. Leading to situational differences in setup. I don't know. I'm just typing that in there. I played a dirge, and I think I remember that. No said appreciate there being some mystery, but hidden AC, soft caps, and stuff like that, not a big fan of. Melee Mage, Topolsky said. Would Wizard suffice? Let's see. And then you added to that one.
Yeah, we definitely plan on making some casters get into the fray more often.
Final Fantasy XI Bard is strongest party class to ever exist in MMO space. Would love to see a class that shines so much. So reference FF. Where's X? Let's see. Make charisma not looks, but force of personality. I would play a very awkward warrior then. Different builds, gear or skills or both, can give the same class 2 different roles based on which build. Alright, so builds, gear or skills or both can give the same class 2 different roles based on the build. You're not going to want to hear this, but that sounds like someone doing more work to have more result, which is a good thing. I see it more as rewarding than punishing. Which part? Were you talking about the earlier discussion? Mr. EQ2 Troubadour. I like my little emo dirge. He had the emo hair and cute wings. Belfaster says, I like charisma being tied to pet strength in general. Gish classes would be really cool. Nick, help me understand. Keebs, what's going on?
Yeesh. I don't know what that is, actually.
Classes that transform your character model or appearance, enchanter, druid type stuff. Alright. Classes that transform your appearance.
A fighter wizard multi-class. There may be some experimentation going on with that.
Yeah. That may be a thing. Adric, we are discussing classes, player classes. Though I'm assuming if we have player classes, then we have non-player classes, but maybe that's something you want to address here in chat. Think different specs, talents, builds, or other ways to play your character are fun for players, but are a balanced nightmare for developers. So different specs, talents, builds are, or So I have a question then. I'm less worried about the balance issue with regards to things like specs, talents, builds, etc. I'm less worried about that than I am the amount then of overlap and homogenization of the classes. Because it seems like the more an identity flexes, the more that identity then blurs with other identities. Whereas I'm less worried about balance. We've talked about balance a lot lately and kind of just been like, fun trumps balance. And I love games with tons of champions and things like that where there's that nice variety. And I'm less worried about whether or not they're all balanced. But feel free to discuss. Allowing classes to gear differently depending on their playstyle. Example, Wisdom Shaman versus hit point based Canny Shaman. That's interesting. Because I also see, like, in the realm of EQ, I wonder how much of that just sort of happened. EVE Online type real-time skill learning to limit spell swapping, or prefer EverQuest hot swapping of abilities so that spellcasters have access to all their abilities or spells at all times. What do you guys think? I'm not going to type all that in, but Nils asked a good question. Here's a wild thought. What about a classless system where you unlock abilities you want to slot in gameplay? There is a classless server that works like that. I would say, and this isn't to like say no to anything, that's not in the spirit of what we're doing here, but we're coming at this, just spoiler alert, with structured, well-defined classes in mind.
Yeah, we haven't talked about, or we've talked about how we don't really like hard specs. The only thing that we may investigate is maybe doing some kind of like soft specking, but there wouldn't be anything too like hard spec, like role changing. It would just be like maybe how you do your role slightly different, but still very early on that.
So, Keeps threw out there and I've written down. Trade skill class, no combat, but can craft things that help the group mid-fight for duration, buffs, / damage, other stuff. Interesting. For classes that illusions / forms make sense, more variation in the effects when in wolf form, bear form, etc. So, for classes that have...
So Crabman, for like the stats, we're going to be expanding on the stats, and there's going to be ways to raise your spell power and heal power. The itemization isn't going to be as limited as, say, your classic EQ, where casters really can't scale very well.
So I wrote down, did I read that out already and was just typing it? Classes that have illusion, forms, more variation. I think I read that out. Another reference, Horizons had a fun multi-classing system. A Mesmer type character. I'm curious how many people in chat like making alts just because it's fun to play different sort of unique feeling classes. Did you miss the monk talk yet? The class that is a support that does damage to do soft heals on people party. So, the class that is a support that variations in levels of engagement to accommodate different player preferences. Not every class needs to be button spammy, but some are.
Yeah, it's funny because with the nature of travel and classic EQ, a lot of people just created alts just to see different parts of the world because they didn't necessarily want to invest their time into moving their character to another zone, getting it bound, and then what if they don't like that zone or whatever, and then they have to go back. So yeah, alting, when travel, there's meaningful travel in the game, then alting becomes a lot more interesting.
Let's see. It's funny that you mention it. Yeah, because that variable does definitely have an impact. Because as you're saying that, it also made me think of races too, right?
Yep.
Multiple build thing is okay, but I think itemization would have to be more lenient to support it. EQ, especially early EQ, int whiz was really boring. What if int was tied to both mana and increased damage from spells, and wisdom was tied to mana and healing power? Crabman said.
Oh, Keeps has a cool idea. Yeah, I was thinking about something like that recently, Keebs. I'm not sure if it's good for our game or not, but it's something that I've been thinking about.
Specializations in weapon types.
Yeah, races will definitely have class limitations. You won't be able to be every class.
Belfaster said, I think if you could get people to worry about focusing at least 3 stats instead of typical 2, primary hit points, that's a win. So, be a win to get people focusing on at least 3 stats instead of primary and HP. Excuse me. Shout out to Runes of Magic.
So Keeb's idea, wanted to follow up on that again. Maybe that could be tied into the play as a monster system.
Oh, I'll have to get down to it.
Point out. Yeah.
Whoa, I'm a little bit behind.
I'll just try to focus on answering questions, and then you can focus on filling out the the statements.
The statements where that works. Jimothy said, me always make a bunch of alts. It's nice to see the varying starting areas and different tunes for each class. Cool. I'm an altaholic, especially these days. I didn't get many classes to very high levels, but I dabble with a bunch of classes races. Altar habit, nice. Only did alts to twink something because I was rich and found a fun class defining item, or to keep my main from outpacing my friends. Fair enough.
Mushinar, I think that's less for like interesting gameplay and more for interesting world building and, you know, kind of immersion and making sure that like these cultures, you know, that are represented by different races, like they feel like, you know, they feel in line with the world, more so than, you know, that's something that like makes the gameplay interesting.
So Mushner's said my favorite classes in MMOs have been when you get to make your own class. Some games like Rift Archage let you choose 3 base classes combined to make your parent into your parent class. So combining classes to make new classes. Topolsky said I enjoyed having my main and mastering and then branching off to get a feel for other classes on another character to keep the game fresh and learn other styles to understand how my teammates, friends play different. Nice. Definitely for twinks. Finding a really cool weapon. That's, I noticed the theme there.
So Belfaster, we're experimenting with the classic 14 classes, but we're also experimenting with another 4 new classes that aren't necessarily final. They're just like, hey, these are in the game for us to mess around with, and if we like what, you know, we see, then we develop it further. And if we go back and like maybe we don't like some of the more classic classes, maybe, you know, we haven't decided to cut anything out yet. We've only decided to add, and then, you know, at a later time we can decide if we want to cut. So the answer right now is we're tinkering with 18 classes, but like for the proof of concept stage, we only have like 6 or 8 or so right now. So, and they're, you know, not fleshed out yet. So it's going to be a process for sure.
I just typed in Falcora's Time Mage that can reverse damage or change attack speed attributes of mobs temporarily. Could even have CC capabilities. It's a fun theme. Let's see.
So,
I just got to Keebs.
Oh, okay. I was going to respond to a question from Mushnar. Would you ever consider a betrayal or system where a non-typical race could do a quest or something, become a class they normally couldn't, similar to an epic weapon level quest? Yeah, we are considering that, actually.
Keebs, answer me this, because I'm just now typing it all in. I like it. It's a cool idea. Could you have a city class, a class that is designed to be played in the main city and not leave, but be a citizen of the city, run shops, restock vendors? Maybe this could be your side character to sell items. Why not have them leave the city? And would they be inherently PvP? Would they be considered essentially a mob if somebody wanted to go after them?
And his second message after that one, Shawn, is he mentions the possibility of it being a side quest or monster mission, and that's what got me thinking to like play as a monster type thing.
Yeah, it's there's definitely something there. Well, that does go along with what we're talking about, the idea of potentially having things like being different levels of guards and stuff like that within the play as a monster. We say monster, but it's essentially
play as a mob.
Play as a mob. So, scrolling some more. Are there plans? You got that one already. Nice. Malcore said, I don't like alts because I hate having an achievement or unlock on one character but not the other. It breaks immersion if you want to see the world as character. So maybe a lot of that stuff should be account bound and not character bound? I don't know. Quests for spells and combat abilities instead of just earning them. Yep. And that's all right, cool. And Belfaster's questions, what triggered the discussion on the 14, 18 classes? One of the things that we'll have to look at too is, I mean, even though we're going for different, simpler level of fidelity, and you know, a lot of our confidence and our ability to do this stuff is based on how data driven a lot of it is and our tools and things like that, we will have to kind of see not just on the sort of class definition and gameplay side, but also just in the other areas, how we ensure that there's enough variety and it looks and feels good as well. But in theory, if we make an MMO that lasts for quite a while, we'll have time to roll out a ton of stuff over time.
I think Keeves had another addition later he wanted added about the daily quest thing.
I just saw that. Something that is a daily quest to give more life to the main cities.
I think the term daily quest will probably scare some people.
Trigger
but
some folks.
Maybe I'd imagine he's trying to, you know, it's the same term, but maybe kind of a different way of going about those type of things.
Like, because you're thinking of quests that then provide some sort of an activity that breathes life into the cities on a regular basis, or no?
I mean, isn't our scheduling kind of that in a way? Like, not necessarily like daily quests, but it appears on certain days during certain times, and it's more dynamic though. It's not like, hey, this NPC is always standing here, and then at like whatever 4 a.m. server time or whatever, it's gonna like reset, and then you can do it again. We're talking more like NPC scheduling quests or something. I don't know.
Let's see. At the data-driven comment, will you have easy access to player statistics? May not be a ton of fans here, but Genshin Impact tracks a lot of gameplay stats to guide their changes, and they share some of the data. Ideally, yeah. Ideally, we'll be pulling all of that so that we can kind of match the quantitative data versus the qualitative data that we're bringing in, and sort of see what's actually happening, because it's amazing when you do have access to that data. And I would say that's one thing that free-to-play games have actually been good for the industry about. They've really, I think, it's my understanding at least, that they were the first games to really track just so much of that data. And it's cool because 2 companies ago, that was the first time I ever did a live stream regularly, and so for the live streams, the team would go down and we would just pull the data, and there'd be things where people were like, we firmly believe this is happening, and you could show the data and be like, no, that is clearly not happening. And sometimes it's one of those ones where it's like, nobody in the world plays, you know, with this or uses this ability, and then you can show the data and go, actually, about 70% of the player base is doing it. So really enjoyed the job system Final Fantasy. Yep, Mushner, we have that one up there. Healers tend to either have not enough skills or too many for healing. Healers also tend to be weak to fight and level up, or be able to get away from fights. So I'll put this down as just a note.
So T-Con, we don't really want to have like rotation, so you don't have to worry about that. We are very much in that kind of boat where you're more choosing what you want to use situationally, and you're not feeling obligated to like spam everything.
Games like EverQuest usually have a big disparity in utility brought between pure melee versus spellcasting player. Are you guys planning on giving warriors the ability to maybe choose a proc type or have abilities that function similar to caster spells?
I would say melee classes will definitely have expanded utility for sure. To what extent and what degree that is yet to be determined, because we don't want to step on the toes of, classes that are, that have to utilize resource management and stuff like that. We don't want to just give really easy freebie abilities that aren't using mana. So yeah, it's something that'll be a delicate decision-making progress, and it'll probably change a lot. But it's melee will definitely have more utility, and but we'll make sure that it feels right.
Adric, I noted it down. I think it probably goes beyond what we're thinking, but there's no harm in making a note. Belfaster, if you played Divinity Original Sin, or maybe even D&D does this, I could have sworn it did. Healing undead does damage, could add some flavor to some healers, clerics, paladins, making undead areas, dungeons, juicy alternative to grouping somewhere else. But 70% are playing wrong. I just got to that. Thanks, Nick. Let's see.
Yeah, Belfaster has a good point too, that, clicky items and proc items, that will also enhance the feeling of a melee class. And I'm also toying with the idea of making those a little bit more prominent in the game, maybe a little bit more relevant earlier on, so you're kind of thrust into that gameplay earlier, and it's not just like, okay, now I'm end game, now I have to go collect these certain items. Maybe kind of ease players into that concept more.
So I was just looking at T-Cons. Comment about weighted melee system like Final Fantasy 11 or Daok, where your action economy was high value, low input. More about using the correct move at the right time versus spamming. Oh, were you responded to this a little bit a second ago, didn't you, Nick?
Yeah.
Cool. Seems like you can either have really well-defined classes with defined roles and hard lines and abilities, or you can have classes be Swiss Army knives at the risk of no one feeling unique. Yeah, true.
I just wanted to point out that we're matching.
Are we?
Yep.
What kind of pants do you have on? None. Okay then, we're not matching. Let's see. Melee classes shouldn't mimic spellcasters for flavor reasons, but give their own utility. Like we talked about rangers making camps the other day. AoE buff, debuff classes like the Diablo 2 Paladin. How much, so how much do you feel that vertical progression, like extremely deep vertical progression, factors into people's desire to have alts or not have alts? I don't know if the question makes sense, but...
So if you're saying if the vertical progression is so long that people are rolling alts because they're just kind of a little bit, you know, getting some treadmill fatigue, so they're like, okay, I'm gonna go make a lower level character, and maybe they're, you know, they get some return out of that because they can level up a little bit faster and reach goals a little bit faster at lower levels as opposed to, say, higher levels where it takes longer time. I could see that, you know, being a mentality of players for sure.
So that's one angle, and then the other one would be if vertical progression was such that you, especially if you play fairly hardcore. I'm trying to find the best way to, like, I don't know, maybe quantify that. If the company isn't necessarily fast to put on more and more headroom, like more vertical progression there, is there more of a tendency to then have additional alts? If, you know what I mean? Like, so we've peaked, but I enjoy the game. I want to play other stuff.
Yeah, I would say so.
The money sink idea stream would not go well. Still waiting for the puppy hot tub stream. You almost had it today. He was so muddy. Can see melee utility as abilities with duration reuse timers lining up so they can only maintain it on one target. So being able to inflict detrimental effects on the targets they're fighting at that time, but not on large groups of monsters, which would be more of a, caster role maybe. Oh, so differentiation between the melee caster utility based on actual scope of the abilities or number of targets. Then in theory you could still have, you may want to burn that differentiation even within casters, right? AoE question is another important piece of class design. Some content Should some content be completed by pulling everything into a ball and AoEing it down? Or should you focus more on single target fights with ads? CC'd.
Definitely the latter. In fact, I don't even, like, I'm going to be very careful about adding AoE to the game at all. Like, the damage, AoE damage, I think is going to be possibly even more restrictive. I really like the concept of parking ads, CCing ads, and choosing the right target order, as opposed to, hey, we have this class composition that can just kind of bypass that part of the game. I'm not super big into AoE. I think that when certain MMOs started branching into that, it became more about just kind of face rolling as opposed to critical thinking. It is fun. It is fun for some people, but we're targeting a demographic of players that I don't think they find it as fun.
Melker says, I play multiple MMOs casually rather than try to play one to 100% completion personally. Wonder how many of you kind of fall into that.
Into which one?
Melker said, I play multiple MMOs casually rather than trying to play one to 100% completion personally. I mean, how many of you would actually describe yourself as fairly casual?
Nowadays, I would say that I'm kind of like that. But I think that's really specific to my goals. Gotta play everything.
Yeah, I can see that.
I used to be one game guy, focus on that, at least as long as I was focusing on it for. I found that the most likely thing to get me to play an MMO nowadays is, do I have a friend playing it? And if I have a friend playing it, then I'm exponentially more likely to play the game.
So, Droop, I checked out your comment. Alcoholics tend not to get very far with most classes. I think he ties into quick, fast content rewards, saying this as an ex-alcoholic. I also seen heavy players 40 hours a week run out of things and just spin up all to either help their trade skill game or even just do other things in games that don't pertain to the min-max mentality of their main. Fair. Horizontal progression would be cool in the sense that leveling an alt would allow you to stock in a new ability or stat increase in your main, like leadership trait. So let me just write down alts.
Yeah, Ali, I like tab dot. I like the concept of like tab dotting things way more than I like the concept of just pure AoE.
Interesting. I think if you watch on that last point I just typed in from Falcarez, if you watch the Pantheon video from this weekend, I think there's like an hour-long video with Ben and Chris, and they were talking about, I forget the name of the system, but it was like the inheritance, or it's the one where you have like oh man, Progeny, yeah. And then I think Japa's comment on there though is the concern about it being that then becoming a mandatory path. If you're trying to be on the leading edge as a player, then you've got to go farm alts to unlock the sockets to, you know what I mean? Like, that's not the example he used, but as I typed this in and read that, it made me think of that example. So, which may be a bit frustrating to some people.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would rather just, encourage people to play alts because they really like playing the game.
Yeah. Focus on one at a time, don't play multiple MMOs, also don't play hardcore. Pretty casual due to life, Droop said. Work, family, kids, other adulting things. And a lot of AoE discussion still. Stick to one MMO for a while to the in-game content, then switch to a different MMO when I get bored. Neck beard when I have vacation, casual when I'm back at work. Oh man. Speaking of which, I hope I can get to a barber soon. These days I tend to go full bore in a game for a while and then take a break from it. Love to get into a character and play it long term, as long as there's not it's not quick to cap and do daily quest situation. Love achieving big things. Never been a quest completionist, but other aspects of the game, sure. Please do a better version of the EQ2 mentoring system. We'll make another note here. Absolutely, friends impact my MMO choice. Love to see some game mechanics or game design that sort of incentivize working together and making friends. So, incentivized friend making. Well, I mean, I think that's one of the sort of, that's an inherent part of having stronger class dependencies and a greater focus on group play, right? And I finally got to the point where everybody said progeny. Thank you.
Yeah, you're definitely right on that. The mechanics of classic style MMO, inherently incentivizes friend making for sure.
Please don't true box it. Some games that you play to more yep.
I like the multiple rule set approach, but that's obviously going to depend on our game-wide population and stuff like that, like how many servers and stuff like that. But
okay, so where are we at here? What about buff channeling versus single target with duration? Cast Valor on someone in your group and they're still in your group, it's stronger, maybe even doesn't fade, but if you cast it on a random passerby, it has a duration.
Well, one thing that we're going to do to address that is we're going to make the durations not feel so bad, especially at lower levels, I think. So that's going to help with that kind of issue, I think.
I'll make the note though. Oh. All right, so we've been going for a solid hour on this. Good job. It's tricky because buff management is certainly something that can make a Group A function better than Group B. Buffs fade when the boss spawns. It could be the difference between win or a wipe. I will say, playing the cleric for the first time on Eridune, I enjoyed that aspect of the game. When we were talking about different classes for different play styles, like constantly checking, making sure everybody's buffs were topped off at the right time, looking at sort of what was going on with regards to like, where's my mana at based on pulls and kind of the heals I was doing, and then how do I want to prioritize refreshing buffs, and oh, here's a nice little gap because we've you know, stalled on pulls because whatever, Monk had a AFK or something. Great, all right, I'll take this opportunity while I'm really topped up on mana to go ahead. You know, like that management game was actually really appealing to me.
Yeah, definitely, because it ties into the whole resource management thing. It's not just resource management in battle, it's resource management out of battle, and you know, the cadence of what spawn situation is going on and whatnot. So
and EQ originally buffs it and show timers, guessing man's game. Yeah, so playing P99, I will say that I do feel that the extra information with a more modern quality of life is nice in that regard. Makes life a little bit easier. I'm not sure how to word this, but a more balanced class power progression. An example is pet classes in EQ, currently leveling an enchanter, and at 53 I could charm level 53 mobs. I didn't get a new charm until 62. Beast Lord pet progression makes leveling... how do you pronounce that word? Like I've always read it. I don't think I've actually had to say it out loud.
slog?
A slog?
Slug?
Sloth? Slog?
Slog.
Pronunciation.
I think he was trying to say slog, yeah. Yeah. I think that's also a side effect from just, you know, being EQ. I think that when we're laying out our abilities and stuff, that we'll probably, you know, think twice about that kind of stuff.
Slew. 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 Slew.
All right, it says slew. I don't know. I don't know. Control Shift T, bring this back up. A slough, a place of deep mud or mire. So the utilization is correct. The way state of moral degradation or spiritual dejection. I've seen it used in that, like, so to me the word was correct. For my inability to speak English, I do read a lot of it. I just didn't know how to hell slew. Poo slew. The bog of eternal stench.
Yeah.
Oh, my headphones aren't plugged in. Battery's dying. Strange. Let me fix that. Gross.
That's where you have to go to get your poo socks.
Poop socks.
That's where they actually become poop socks.
Oh man. I can't wait to get our merch store up. Poop socks.
Me too.
Gnome.
I can't hold it any longer.
The gnome body pillow. The ogre body pillow. Droop, I don't know that I do want to experience that though. The old way of no buff timers, no mana numbers, no spell descriptions. Now that shows on tech key. I don't know that I do. That it may be too hardcore. That may actually... It's going to be interesting to see where we draw the line. What kind of art style or inspiration are we using for Project N? Mishnar, have you been to the website? I'll answer you, but I'm also going to ask you that question. So we're really inspired by the classic fantasy painters. If you look at like Larry Elmore, Jeff Easley, folks like that. Essentially all that cool shit they used to see on like book covers back in the day, your Dragonlance books, pen and paper, illustrations, fantasy art, airbrushed on creepy vans. Have Prancy Rangers already been covered? Maybe not well enough. What thoughts do you have on Prancy Rangers, Ash? Going through hell levels is a form of spiritual dejection, so that works too. Do you guys like hell levels? Nick's nodding. Yes, pain brings people together and builds character. That was my dad's parenting philosophy. Oh. Shared experiences are good, even in Alpha 1. Not at all for me personally. Tends to be what makes me quit. Not unless you can fish in a lake of lava. Learned it from Calvin and Hobbes. My dad was a sergeant in the army. Forever. Even though I'm against that, I understand and accept why you would hide certain data, but things like hiding spell durations for effects, removing in-game maps, etc. is just removing quality of life. We'll have to debate on in-game maps and what you mean by that, Ortis. On the class topic. What do we have? Other thoughts on classes. What are big topics that we need to dig into over time? What are the big burning questions? No deep thoughts on Prancy Rangers. I just know I'm usually disappointed with MMO Rangers because they make them more like shield surfing Legolas than shaves with a dull straight edge razor Aragorn. It's the Aragorn versus Legolas conversation.
Yep, we're having that conversation internally as well. And that's why we're experimenting with some extra classes.
Yep. Even Ollie. For those of you who don't know, I would assume many of you do though. The meow in chat is Ollie. So you'll see Bunny in chat with us. You'll see the meow in chat with us. Occasionally you'll see Hamad in here as well. Zachary was in here earlier. Forever Mash, an in-game map with landmarks that doesn't ping your current location and ability to put your own notes on it equals beautiful purple heart. It sounds like we're in alignment. Altitis, you missed the first hour. We can recap that in a second, but if you look, it's not as super lengthy as the previous one. So how about class decisions on character creation versus more organic tier decisions, EQ versus EQ2? Okay, I like that. As a topic. I mean, we have our thoughts on it.
Yeah, Altitis, we're very much not wanting to do rotations and the typical like global cooldown cadence, that you would expect from more modern games. We are kind of defaulting back to the old school EQ style, and then we're going to iterate from there and see if we could do some more fun new things with that.
Let's see. Kitten Army 1997. Wonderful imagery in that name. Thank you for the follow. Are we handling binding gating class base similar to EQ?
We're still deciding that. We talked about maybe, I know Shawn, you mentioned about maybe wanting to make it more city centric and stuff like that. So that's not set in stone yet. But I'm definitely aware of some of the more exploitive ways that people use binding and gating. So I'm not gonna. We're gonna. Well, I'm not. Let me rephrase that. We are going to think about those kind of things and behaviors and act accordingly.
I like how you preface that. I'm aware of the more exploitive. As an exploiter, I am aware of the various things that you can do to break the game with those abilities. Droop said basic rule of thumb of good game design is that all the information needed for the game should be contained within the game. You shouldn't have to disengage, look up, wiki, or print off extra stuff from the interwebs. Big difference between no in-game maps and having limited in-game maps that don't have GPS component. Okay, so I think we're in alignment. I would love to sit here and argue about what makes good game design for a while, but we'll save that for a separate time. Droop, hit me up on Discord. But I think we're saying the same things there with regards to providing a limited in-game map that doesn't have a ping on it. Yep. More restrictive is our direction so far. Experimenting still, Ali said. Correct. Nick said that as well. Wonderful. One nostalgic thing about classic EQ classes was that balance wasn't really a concern. Mathematical balance doesn't seem like a big deal to me in terms of combat throughput. I'm glad you like that.
I think the mathematical balance comes more into the resource management side of it more prominently, and that's one aspect of the numbers that I'm looking at quite a bit is, having your efficient spells, your inefficient spells, is because that matters a lot more in a game where your regeneration is more restricted.
Meow. Thank you for the prime. 9 months.
Yeah, Belfaster, I'm not sure about Call the Hero yet, or summoning spells. Again, there's different ways you can exploit those or what have you. So it's a cool ability. You just gotta think about how it'll work.
We were talking about this as well. I think we even hit on this a little bit when we were doing the dungeon discussion, right? Because instead of having Call of the Hero, we're talking about if there are certain points within, or even if you have Call of the Hero, should it be bound to certain places or and again, that goes back into Call the Hero and binding and gating and all of that. Well, I think they'll fall into the same bit of discussion that we'll be having. And to Ali and Nick's earlier points, we're starting from a more restrictive approach and then kind of seeing where we go from there. If anything, EQ moved too fast to teleport your entire group. Probably should have had some incremental increases, 1 person, 3 people, and then full groups around max level. But yeah, and then Oh, it's interesting because there are also was it introduced in Velius where you actually had to go to Velius was the first time where you had to go get something from the ring to unlock the ring. Is that correct? I guess what I mean by that is it seems a bit fast as well when it's like, okay, here's access to all these places now. It's kind of cool if you've never been there before, but it just feels a bit fast. What about extra actions that classes can do when they wipe or die? Like a cleric with 1 extra heal from the grave, or a necromancer able to have a pet continue to attack while spectating for a brief time?
I was just thinking about that last night because I was watching somebody who was playing Guild Wars 2. And I guess they have like a knockdown status where you have like an ability bar. And it made me think about like old school EQ with getting knocked unconscious and the Purple Club, and just thinking about it, not really any concrete thoughts.
So I think I mentioned that in an earlier stream and had the example of NPC perception as well. So you could get extend a perp and potentially fall off of their hate list, but then they're rolling a perception check to see if they realize that you're still alive to basically do a little coup de grace. And so it's a bit of an RNG style, like strange opportunity to holy shit, you return from Purple Land and save the day. But it was just meant as like a very random mechanic. So,
and not at all like the Nemesis system at all.
I'm reading now and trying to. Wait, I never played Shadows of Mordor or the other one. Was there a mechanic like that in there, or were you referring to something else with the Nemesis?
It's kind of a perception system of sorts. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering. Yeah, well, as long as I don't know. The cool thing is our lawyer's done a nice breakdown on that patent, so he should be able to steer us clear. I'm going to make a note here.
So, Belfaster, we may be experimenting with a class that functions more like more of an archer type, independent from like a ranger type. So, again, going back to that Aragorn versus Legolas earlier, like I want to try 2 separate classes, but you know, if there's too much overlap with like the class fantasy, like ranger, you know, is the archer like a ranger, or is he like, what is he, you know? So it's something we're going to experiment with, and if, you know, we feel that it's just too much, then we could cut, but right now we're just going to have, you know, the normal classes plus some extra classes to experiment during development, since we're so early.
Single target summoning was the only thing you had for a long time in the original game. I missed the part up there that was referring to. Not being strong all the time is okay, but if a class is weak across the board, it's no fun. Buffing a class by creating challenges that are more suited to that class, I feel, is a better way to make things more balanced and still keep the precious class identity diversity. Is multi-classing off the table? It sounds like you're all sticking with some hard-to-find classes. Yeah, I would say that as it's come up, it's just we'd rather stick with hard-to-find classes, and if there's opportunity, if there would be value, and I'm just speaking off the cuff here, like to get your thoughts. If there's value to a hybridization of two classes, then it was, in my mind, worth looking at that as an additional interesting class to add.
Yeah, because, you know, one class can technically fill in multiple roles. They might not be the best at them. Like, look at, you know, like the EQ Shaman or something. Like, they can tank some mobs, but, you know, better than some other classes. But, you know, they're not necessarily a great tank, per se. Like, if it's inherent to the class design, yes, you know, but in terms of like a system that's like, hey, we're multi-classing, or there's like this hard, you know, spec role changing system, like talent system, I don't think we're that. The least we maybe could be maybe a soft spec system, but that hasn't been determined at all yet, so.
So Ash has an interesting question. Classes with interesting utility already in your notes. Thinking levitate, enchant bars, imbue gems, night vision, Sal. Excuse me. Hopefully beyond even EQ's use of it. I don't think we've discussed it in just those specific terms. Hey, Popsicle. So I'd be curious to maybe hit on this theme a little bit, like people's thoughts on what is interesting utility, or what are interesting abilities, what makes certain classes interesting. What are those dope spells and abilities?
High risk, high reward stuff, I think. Charm comes to mind. I know some people really hate Charm and some people really like Charm, but that's something that sticks out to me.
And if some of these happen to be like more skills than class specific skills, like sort of trade skills or whatever we wind up calling them, that's fine as well. Forever Mash. I'm gonna jot it down. Always felt what makes them interesting are their uniqueness. Enchanters are the only ones to be able to give you crack. Snare, fear, bane, slow, clarity, haste, charm, teleport. I like your example, Drew. Good stuff. Tough line, either support classes are so strong they're always mandatory or they're useless. Either you have EQ1 Chanter or you have Rift support classes that people just ignore. Debuffs and CC that actually means something. Actually mean something. Walking across Kunark as a class without levitate and with levitate are two wildly different experiences. The curse for no bat wings. Ooh, good question. Reagents for spells.
I don't actually believe like stuff like the EQ1 enchanter is like absolutely required for all situations. Like there, you know, I guess it really depends on what you're talking about, but I think that, you know, the ability to put together groups without support classes is possible. You just got to be a little creative and skilled, I think, to, you know, pull some of that stuff off, and I think that's possible.
New class items that were cool too, or were cool too. Cool too. Bard / rogue masks. Added good flavor. Does non-combat utility count? Anything related to exploring and learning about lore and monsters is interesting. I think it counts. It may fall more into our set of like skills. I thought we had a term for it, but essentially we were talking about skills, and I don't want to just say trade skills, but essentially those additional skills. And I remember, Nick, we were having one conversation. I think I was walking Ziggy that day and talking to you. And it was just talking about like going very random and sort of eclectic with those things. So it's like, you know, everything from normal trade skills to astrology or archaeology and all of that stuff. So
Yeah.
fire away forever, Mash.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. The enchanter is just extremely powerful, and a large reason for that is because of charm.
Debuffs. It's funny. I especially hopping on that Necro, and looking at their spell lineup. I agree with you, Belfaster. Debuffs are a good point. Other than slow and snare, it never seemed like debuffs had much of a tangible effect. Something like weaken, siphon strength was a cool idea. It just didn't really do anything. Do you think that was an issue of the formulas, the way things like combat actually utilize those stats, or just they weren't powerful enough to actually provide any sort of effect? Do you guys know offhand? Nick, Ali, anybody?
I think part of it too comes down to just mana efficiency as well. Like,
True.
Maybe there is some kind of effect, but is it really, you know, is it actually like a boon to your resource management, or is it,
right,
you know, yeah.
Druid lore spells were awesome. Yeah, if you're gonna spend that time and mana on something, is it really gonna be that? In that situation?
And that might be a good place to put some melee utility, because those don't cost, they wouldn't cost mana, right? So something to think about.
Talk to animals ability would be really cool. Oh. include talk to the dead. Talk to the dead. Orc boy, what's going on? That beautiful wog. How are you doing today? Thank you for the raid. Welcome all y'all.
Yeah, Belfaster, we've talked about how we like the concept of giving items to pets, and maybe even, you know, make them look kind of cool with, like, you know, displayable armor and stuff like that. But we've also were recently talking about, you know, pet ability bars and stuff.
Hmm. Clerics and Necros doing quests for ghosts. I was eating dinner and thumbing through, and I saw you had the mischief practice run going. Hey Tequila, it's good to see you. I'm gonna scroll up a little bit. Got to level 8 quickly and efficiently. Right on. Are you going straight for mischief, or do you think it's best to go ahead and just plan on the secondary server? What are you thinking? I'm gonna scroll up and see what I missed here. Maybe revamping some of the utility EQ failed on. Enchanter's spell Sentinel. So prove old concepts like Sentinel. Quizzy identify. Mix of thoughts, invis, lol, maybe diplomacy skill. We got Sal. We've already got a Sal in game even. Transmutation of items. Got lockpick written down. ACD buffs. Cripple. Going straight for mischief. Right on. Build concept rogue ability escape combat.
Lack of ability to escape combat, maybe.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
And also, I think sharing strength gear with, like, you know, other class, like warrior or whatever, maybe they want a different stat for rogues. Not sure.
Scrolling back up again. Sending messages, items, utility spells could be fun. Put the mail delivery in the player's hands. Well, we already said we're gonna have Nick deliver all the mail. Force community interaction. Expand on pet management for classes. I think Nick, that was the one that you were talking about, right?
Hmm. Yeah, reference EQ AAs for baseline abilities. Nils has a good point.
Oh, yeah.
Do any of them come to mind to you, Nils?
This is my thinking face. Virulent paralysis, root knockback, DD.
Do you guys, this is a question for everybody, do you guys like the more modern version of taunt where you literally force the target switch, or do you kind of like more of the old school style where you have to, you know, warriors and tank classes have to do more threat generation as opposed to just, hey, I taunt and steal the threat and then now I'm good or whatever?
Playing TLP for the first time since I switched to WoW in 2004. Having cooldowns I can use every boss just makes classes much more interesting. Servant of Row feels good to push on mages after basically AFKing the first 4 expansions.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot in chat, people liking the threat generation concept, and that was something to me that I was thinking about recently, and yeah, we're going to be careful about how that goes in. Because I still like the concept of having some longer cooldown abilities that are, you know, have that power, but in general, you're going to be wanting to build, you know, threat.
Yeah, it really does have an interesting impact on combat pacing. Maybe I'm wrong, but I could have sworn I felt that more with the power increase in Kunark. It's been a while. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't, Zaka, I hear what you're saying about the dependence on needing certain items to fulfill your class's role, but we don't want the class to be too good that other classes don't have to play correctly.
And to the point you just made, Nick, I like the idea of having a long cooldown ability to be able to, you know, have that taunt on command in an oh shit, you know, situation. But like you just said, just negating people's ability, or negating the need for people to monitor and manage their threat generation as well, kind of takes something away from it.
So this is another piece of feedback I wanted to get some feedback on. The current thought I have is in 8, the limited, you know, we're gonna have a limited ability set like classic EQ, so I'm thinking like just the standard 8, but for abilities with cooldown longer than, say, maybe 30 to 60 seconds or longer, you have a separate bar for that, which is limited to 4. So you have your 8, you know, normal abilities, and then your 4 cooldown abilities. And this cooldown bar would encompass, you know, stuff like disciplines, longer cooldown spells like Divine Aura, stuff like that. So do you guys think that 8 plus 4 would be a good system? What do your guys' take on it?
Derpalurp agrees. Derpalurp also has a fun name to say.
Agreed.
Seems weird to have to shuffle my skills around because I can't remember how to kick, taunt, and parry all at the same time.
It is a good point. That does make sense.
The reason why I never want snap aggro abilities to ever work on a raid target is because of the meta created when the main tank dies. Raid mob turns on the next highest threat target, and oftentimes that class will have disciplines to negate that damage for a short period. We call these bumps on P99. You get a bump or a series of bumps in there until a new tank is established. The term just bump. Poor bumps. Yep, speed bump. No, I know. Sorry, I was just off in imagination land, like picturing the actual fiction there. Alright, Shawn, we need you to run up there and just bear hug that son of a bitch. You're not going to last very long, but you're going to take it for the team. Rather have a limited number of available abilities at any given time than have to try to keep up with 42 hotbars of 10 buttons each. Don't let Scorn hear you say that.
We need some kind of lore reason for melee classes not knowing all their abilities at once. Like fighting style or something.
They're just stupid.
Yeah, okay, yeah, exactly.
Punch, then kick? I'd have to think about it. You can divide skills from magic, not sure if change down the line, or melee skills treated like spells in your game. Like, will there be 5 types of kicks if I'm a max level warrior, or do I just have kick and my skill is 300 by max level? Solid question.
That is a solid question.
We had a discussion about this recently, I thought.
I think there may be more cooldown sharing. So like just like in Classic EQ, I think there's going to be a little bit more cooldown sharing on melee classes. So technically you wouldn't be able to do that. Melees are definitely going to play different than casters. So even though you may scribe and memorize spells similarly, you might not be able to utilize all those spells simultaneously.
And Ali also mentioned abilities can be spells or martial skills or other, as usual, still experimenting. And if you didn't see it earlier, Ali said that he's listening to this while working on the ability system. So that's fun.
Yeah, that's something that I was thinking about is, you know, spell global cooldown versus melee global cooldown. And something that I wanted to poke Ollie about was like certain spells or abilities that share the same cooldown, but not necessarily the same global cooldown. Is that what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But basically, yeah, I would like the ability to basically make a pool of abilities that share the same cooldown, similar to how like kick and bash would function in Classic EQ, and have that separate from the global cooldown. Yeah, that was it, because I wanted to have like the melee global cooldown separate from that.
Ali said, well, data-wise, that does work.
Yeah. So basically, the idea behind melee is kind of, you know, choosing which ability situationally. A lot more situational decision making. Yep, exactly. And have that mechanic instead of basically depending on the melee global cooldown to do that. So I'm not restricted in that way.
And you're responding to Ali's comment?
Yes. Yep.
So if kick was of shared cooldown damage and strike was also shared cooldown damage, they would both go on cooldown. Fortis said, having some actual choices in which abilities are correct for an encounter as a melee class would be amazing. I'm gonna make a note on that.
I don't think we have any intended class count for the vertical slice. I think we have like what, 6 classes or so, 6, 7, maybe 8. And they're, like I said earlier, they're not like completely fleshed out by any means. But whatever we can get in, really.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that I think I was referencing earlier when I was talking about fidelity and our ability to do classes, it's definitely applicable to the proof of concept. Like right now we have capsules, no animations, no spell effects, right? It's really just about like the feel of the data. And so with that in mind, I think when you see us talking about the number of classes that we can do, it's really going to come down to like, all right, well, what let me start that over. It's going to come down to us going in and really just playing with the data and sort of the base feel of the gameplay prior to there being animations and art and all this other stuff. I'm curious to see how that works out ultimately, and we'll probably stub in some effects and some other things so that we can see what's going on a little bit better. But hopefully this allows us to get a lot more first-hand experience at a much lower cost with some of the ideas that we're talking about.
Yeah, and that same kind of concept, you know, applies to like mob types too. Like we were talking about how, you know, I could have like 100 different mob types right now, but once art starts coming into the picture, you have to kind of cut that list down and be more rigid or whatever.
Yeah. Which, you know, we're kind of doing as we're planning, and as we slowly get a better idea of what it's going to take and cost on the art side, we'll reconfigure some of these things to account for just the reality of the logistics. Maskas said, a way to make melee class different from other melee classes would be give them ways to manipulate their cooldown with stuff like parrying, blocking, etc. Depends on how active you want the combat to be in that way, of course. Well, and as you say that, that makes me then also think if that level of activity is also unique to a specific class, is that kind of like, you know, again, different classes playing different ways. It's possible that there may be something like that, but it may be more class specific.
Yeah, I like it, Nils. And yeah, definitely gonna make sure that there are situations where, you know, they're useful. We don't want to put something in that feels kind of useless, right? Especially if it's kind of meant to be more class defining.
Make those regular spells that work extra on a mob.
Yeah, mass guest. That's something I'm thinking about too. Obviously, I wouldn't want to make it too spammy or anything like that. But you know, small little bonuses for doing the thing, like maybe scoring an interrupt or something.
It's interesting because as you guys were talking about that, then I'm picturing some of the sort of variations that we've talked about where it's like additional classes where it's kind of like this one class, but then there's a different take on it, and I'm curious if then sort of the level of sophistication or level of activity or whatever required within that class is one way to basically have classes that do share some similarities. There in theory is some overlap, but they do still wind up playing a good bit differently. So,
I definitely want the melee classes to feel a bit more like playmakers. Like the monk really kind of feels like a class that can be a playmaker essentially, but then you have something like the rogue, which is kind of limited, and if you know these classes are gonna not be sitting around regenerating, I want them to be active, you know, whether that's like polling or scouting or, you know, doing something, being a playmaker, being a leader type.
so I jotted that little note down as well. Some of the stuff, it's nice to have these notes at the end of it, even if it's just something like, you know, Belfaster, as you're saying. Monk was sweet spot on how much is going on as far as hitting buttons. Because when we go back and we're talking about all of this later, or referring back to this at some point, then once
And I think this might be kind of encounter, and this is encounter related, and this is a whole nother topic, but I think based on how encounters let me rephrase it. I would like for like stuff like interrupts to be more relevant, and that would, you know, so encounters can do that by having challenging encounters and important spells that you have to interrupt. So that also makes classes with interrupts more important. So that's another avenue that I want to take with melee classes.
And that was in response to Ash's point. Nick?
I think so.
So
No, that was more to, I think, to Belfaster.
let me. Okay. So looking at Ash's comment, toggle your classes use of its shoots to develop play style for a period. Have it on longer CD.
So one thing that I actually really liked from the classic EQ client was telegraphing difficulty level, especially with like your race class selection,
Oh,
like
yeah.
deity selection, and that was something that I kind of wanted to have in there. Definitely for like the difficulty in the world aspect, but also the class thing could definitely that could work too, I would say. That was in response to Timmy's comment.
Yeah, I just made a note, kind of a hybrid.
So what I was saying, Ollie, is basically when you create a character in the classic EQ client, once you get to the end of character creation, it's like this class, race, deity combination is of like a low difficulty or a very high difficulty. And to Timmy's point, he was talking about the game isn't very good at telegraphing difficulty level at character creation. And I was just bringing up the fact that EQ kind of did that. It not necessarily makes sense like later on, like like a dark elf necromancer is probably not going to be very hard, right? It's gonna be like one of the nicest decisions you've made probably, but maybe kind of expanding and elaborating more on that.
Was it based on how many races hated you or the experienced class penalties at the time? I think it was a little bit of all of it. Nick, you even posted a screenshot. I was gonna see on Slack if I could find it, but you even posted a screenshot of that.
Yeah, that's what I was just looking for. I think it was a video.
Oh, it may have been. And you probably posted it in inspiration if I had to guess.
Oh, here, I put the streamable link in the chat. Apologies for how slow and clumsily I clicked around the UI. I did that on a trackpad, so.
It's pretty small. Let me see if I do this.
Actually, I what prompted me to make that video was the map part of it, because I think we were talking about something like that, choosing starting location. I thought that it was cool how they did the starting location selection.
Shows you your options based on the choices you've made so far.
Mm-hmm.
You may begin here. Kanos, City of Men. It's raining men. Hallelujah.
I love those little descriptions too.
Welcome to Kanos. Kanos is a busy human port city that is dedicated to the principles of law and ruled over by the strong, benevolent hand of Antonius Baal. Established and operated by the Order of Three, the Hall of Sorcery is the center of magical research for the western half of Antonica. As one of the Order of Three, you seek knowledge and power, but must be constantly on guard against the dark forces of necromancy, especially the Bloodsavers. Boo. Through arcane means, you are able to enhance and protect yourself and your allies while cursing or beguiling your foes. This race class deity combination is of moderate difficulty.
I like that.
Cool. We have high expectations for the random name generator.
No, gas mask? Mask gask? Actually, we were talking about that yesterday on the stream briefly. Flavor text for items. So when you inspect an item, there's a field where you could put some flavor text in. But you were saying, not only that, but also identifying on an item and getting some text. So yeah, I could see both flavor text and identify text, or like identify name or whatever.
Okay. All right, so we're coming up on 10:30 my time. For those folks that came in late, we've in the past been doing a quick review of like just the notes that have been in here. People have found that helpful in the past. Would you like me to run through it again real quick? Usually takes about 5 minutes. I'll check something while I wait for you to respond. I would certainly listen. Came in a bit late. Word. Lee just wants to hear me talk. Alright, I'll go for it. Before I do that, let me do this real quick. Those of you that are new here and you have not checked it out, Project In, we've got a little placeholder website up. You can learn about our project there. You'll get a feel for it's got an FAQ, but you can also get a feel for art style, a number of things. So, and interviews. We've been going for a couple hours now, right, Nick? And we haven't crashed? I didn't even think about that fact. So Nick's on Discord. We're doing this as kind of an experiment because I was having some problems when I moved from Stockholm to Bremen here in Germany. And so I tried to have a couple interviews and my internet crashed out. So fingers crossed that the fact that Nick is still with us and my stream hasn't died means that we can get back on getting the interviews going again. Those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, there's about 40 hours of EverQuest developers, former designers and current artists and studio heads and all sorts of people there. Check it out. All right, so and I will go through this. Yeah, more ideas flow while reviewing. That's true. All right, so these notes are kind of all over the place. And I'm just going to read them as is. And I guess ask in chat if there are any questions or ideas. Classes that create interesting synergies with other classes. Enjoy class trifecta. Tank, DPS, healers. Nick, you had said something right after this and I didn't write it down. Instead of the trifecta, what are you describing the quad as?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Instead of the trifecta,
the quaternity.
Quaternity, yes. All right, whatever. Multi-classing question. Came up a bunch. Defensive targeting. Classes that are completely unique compared to other classes in the game. Classes that have an ability, a unique ability. It's nice to always have a spot in a group and not have every class be a jack of all trades. Shadowbane had mobs dropping rare class runes to unlock a class on your account. classes needing unique buffs from other classes to perform top end. Disciple class was amazing in Vanguard. Classes are allowed to be different. Homogenization goes against class fantasy. Some classes should be able to do things better than others. Unique resources for various classes. Rage, mana, energy. Strengths in solo versus group versus raid settings. Should all classes get value from all stats? Example, warrior and charisma. Hybrid style classes that can fill in other roles. Example, DPS saves the party with heals or tank pet. All classes available on one character, Final Fantasy style. Buff stacking / overlap is certainly a thing. Even WoW had issues with the number of buff slots, limiting resources to something simpler like endurance and mana. Unless it's a third one. EQ2, example EQ2 Bard Chanters having way more buffs, group buffs than you can maintain, leading to situation differences in setup. Situational. That's my bad. Melee Mage. Quaternity, did I put a D in there? My bad. You have one more to discuss, Ali. Should we have stat allocation during character creation? You guys go ahead and answer that in chat while I continue to read off. Ali's question was, should we have stat allocation during character creation? Another reference point, Final Fantasy XI Bard class. Charisma is force of personality, not looks. Different builds, gear, or skills, or both, can give the same class two different roles based on the build. Charisma tied to pet strengths in general. Gish classes would be really cool. Classes that transform your appearance. A druid, enchanter. Different specs, talents, builds, or other ways to specialize your character are fun, but a nightmare to balance. Allowing classes to gear differently depending on their playstyle. Whiz-based shaman versus hit point-based canny shaman. Trade skills class, no combat, but can craft things to help the group mid-fight for duration. Buffs, damage. For classes that have illusions, forms, more variation in effects when in wolf form, bear form, etc., more than just visual. Another reference, Horizons had a fun multi-classing system. A Mesmer type character was requested. A class that is a support that does damage to do soft heals on people / the party. Variation on levels of engagement to accommodate different player preferences. Not every class needs to be button spammy, but some are. What if int was tied to both mana and increased damage / wisdom tied to mana as well as healing power? Specializations and weapons types. Would be a win to get people focused on at least 3 stats instead of just primary and hit points. Alright, you guys are discussing stat allocation stuff. Good. Reference, Runes of Magic for multiclassing. Combining classes to make new classes, and I think is Archage and was it Rift that was referenced here? A time mage that can reverse damage or change attack speed attributes of mobs temporarily. Could even CC. Could you have a city class that is designed to be played in the main cities and not leave, but be a citizen of the city, run shops, restock vendors? Could be expanded. Could even be a side quest like monster mission quests, and have quests that occur regularly to help breathe life into the cities. The Elusive Chronomancer. The Time Mage / Chronomancer. We talked a ton about time manipulation when I was working on DC Universe, just because a lot of the heroes, villains have that. That was one of those ones we talked about so much, trying to figure out how to do it in a fun way. Quests for spells and combat abilities instead of just earning them on level up. Healers tend to have either not enough skills or too many for healing, but also tend to be too weak to fight and level up or get away from fights on their own. What about a Strength Wizard or an Int Warrior? Healing, and that was like, what about turning sort of stats and their relationship to classes on their head to get a different effect? Healing, doing damage to undead, a la like D&D. Weighted melee system like in Final Fantasy XI or Daok. Action economy was high value, low input. More about using the correct move at the right time versus spamming. Seems like you can either have really defined classes with defined roles and hard lines and abilities, or you can have Swiss Army knives at the risk of no one feeling unique. Melee classes shouldn't mimic spellcasters for flavor reasons, but give them their own utility. Example, rangers making camps, per previous discussion that we had. AoE debuff and buff classes like Diablo 2 Paladin, which had the offensive and defensive auras. Leveling alts, allowing you to socket a new ability or get some sort of benefit. Reference EQ2 mentoring system. Incentivized friend making. What about a buff channeling versus single target with duration? Resource management relative to buffs, battle, etc. Class decisions on character creation versus more organic tier decisions, EQ versus EQ2. Survivalist versus Legolas. We were having the Aragorn Legolas discussion on the Ranger front. Handling binding. How are we handling binding gating? Class-based. Are we doing it similar to EQ? Also, later on we discussed Call the Hero thrown in there as well. Extra actions that classes can do when they wipe or die. Example, extra heal from the grave. Necro, able to have pet continue attack while spectating briefly. You can move too fast for to teleport your entire group. Probably should have had some incremental increases. Let's see. I'm just going to add it right in here. Blueberry. Since you guys are talking about always thought soft cap, hard cap stat goals kind of silly. Maybe they should be hard to attain at the very least. And then Sushi said, I prefer no cap on stats, diminishing returns on investment. Excuse me. Classes with interesting utility: levitate, enchant bars, imbue gems, night vision, sal, comprehend languages, snare, fear, feign, slow, clarity, haste, charm, teleport, debuffs, and CCs that mean something. Garandis, thank you for the follow. Let's see. Uniqueness in abilities. Enchanters being the only ones to give you crack. Tracking. Make disarm trap / detect trap pickpocket more impactful. Nick, you call out if something is going on in chat that I need to add in here. How about that? And I'll just keep reading.
Okay.
Let's see. Unique class items were cool too. Bard / rogue masks added good flavor. Didn't necessarily impact balance. See, anything related to exploring and learning about lore and monsters. Debuffs like weaken / siphon strength were cool ideas, but they didn't really do anything. Druid lore spells were awesome. Talk to animals ability would be really cool for druids, rangers. I'd tack shaman on there when you were saying it. Basically naturalist of some sort. Expand That to include talk to the dead, clerics, and necros doing quests for ghosts. Improve old concepts like Sentinel or Wizzy's Identify. Didn't Sentinel just spam you? I forget. Invis lol. Maybe diplomacy skills. Transmutations of items, AC debuffs, cripples, rogue ability to escape combat, different stat for rogues rather than. So this is actually two things. It'd probably be easier to remember if I just do this. Rogue's ability to escape combat, different stat for rogues rather than strength. Expanded pet management, sending items as an ability, looking to EQs, we'll say look into EQs, and AAs and implement some of those as just baseline skills. We asked about some of the AAs, Shaman Swarm Pet, Virulent Paralysis, which is a root, not back direct damage, AoE Taunt. Threat generation for Taunt was discussed. And then longer cooldown for the Forced Taunt version of it. Disciplines were good for long cooldown abilities, but need to find a sweet spot for cooldown times. EQs may be too long. Some actual choices in which abilities are correct for the encounter as a melee class would be amazing. Ali said to make a note of brawling. Bane-like spells should be regular spells that work extra on the... Bane-like spells should be regular spells that work extra on the specific main mob. And then there's comment about the duelist rogue type character being more elegant and agile, engaged in the combat process than say a brutish ogre with a club. And that's when I was thinking about similar style of classes, but with more active combat or whatever as a different part of their differentiation from, I guess, their sibling class. Monk was a sweet spot of how much is going on as far as hitting buttons. Toggle your class's use of abilities to swap up playstyle for a period, having a longer cooldown. Be more upfront with varying class complexity, and identify spell / ability providing additional flavor text. Okay.
There's a couple new ideas that have been posted that you're gonna have to. I think. Let's see.
Starting with Maskask or nope, up there Mushnar says might already be covered, some form of.
I know Timmy's idea was one for sure. Maskask's one about the evil wrathful melee classes. And I think a shot is pretty much covering the same thing.
After
spells and skills triggered by death, basically. It's thematic.
Okay, so Timmy, Mushnar, I got yours with regards to additional advancement to keep you going. Timmy's is Final Fantasy 11, you had to learn weapon-specific abilities as you raise your weapon skills. Cool, but could cause ability bloat to specific playstyles over others. Interesting. That got me thinking about what we were discussing earlier with regards to, is it sort of a linear progression of a skill, or is it abilities that you find?
Kind of reminds me of DAOC, except in DAOC you're not like just passively raising your skills as you're using stuff. You actually specialized into a weapon type, and as the higher you were in that specialization, you unlock more abilities.
Yeah, because I was just thinking of the passive advancement of those skills as being sort of the base for then they're essentially that skill level that you gain through passive use then becomes a prereq for unlocking certain abilities that you then go get the same way you'd get other abilities or spells. But
and that's one of the things that I like to think about too, in terms of like soft specs. Like, how can you get a little bit more flavor out of classes and class, like, and guess decision making, right? Without vastly changing how a class plays or changing its role.
2, Mask asks, note here, for extra actions that classes can do when they die, I always liked evil, wrathful melee classes either having a too hateful to die for a bit or wrathful spirit that keeps attacking for a few seconds aspect. Cool. Let me see if I can go up to, where was that actually? I kind of wanted to add it in line. Cool, found it. Too pissy to die. Is that wrong? Am I being unprofessional? Too hateful to die. For a bit, or a wrathful spirit that keeps attacking for some seconds. Thank you, Google. Let's see. Along with spells, skills triggered by death, spells triggered by combat conditions are cool too. Speaking of which, how much do you feel that NPCs or mobs that you're dealing with should align with your understanding of player abilities of the same class?
Wait, can you rephrase that?
So how much, when you're fighting a mob and you've identified its class, either through we do the sort of naming convention or whatever where it makes it very clear or whatever, how much do you feel that those mobs should have like the full kit and try to replicate player behavior?
I think it should be more so than classic EQ, but not to the level of feeling like they're actual players, because World of Warcraft actually did do that. They did like different encounters that were meant to feel like PvP encounters, but they're actually PvE encounters, and I don't think I really like those. I like that there's some degree of mob predictability, but I feel like their ability pool and their AI, like how smart the AI is, should be a little bit better. Like if you're enchanter in your group mez or something, maybe, you know, one of the caster mobs that are loose probably really wants to cast a spell on that mob, you know, stuff like that.
Cool. Yeah, that it's funny because that kind of hit on one of the, Ollie, was that you saying goodnight to us? Good night, Ollie, if you're still there. That was one of the notes that came up on the Pantheon thing. I think I made a little note on that, right? They were talking about the mob sort of sniffing or assessing player abilities through their understanding of like player classes, and then keeping an eye out for like opportunities to interrupt if a heal's coming up or longer cast time, stuff like that. So I'm very interested in that topic and kind of seeing how that works, where they go with it, and then what our thoughts are as well, because it's just kind of a fun area when you're doing encounter design. Maybe have quests to upgrade spells to have conditional bane components. see. I like the Bane. Playing EQ is funny, like getting that little Bane proc, that crit every once in a while. It's silly because I think I noticed it most on that rogue that I was playing with and just farming the shit out of skeletons. But it's nice every once in a while when that pops off. Favored enemy would be an interesting ability for rangers. I think it's an interesting ability. In general, favored enemy. I feel like I missed something up there. Hopefully I didn't. Love interrupts and being able to decide if I want to interrupt a spell or ability with a stun or silence.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, I definitely want to encourage interrupts from an encounter standpoint. Like some of the encounters and mobs that you face, if you're not interrupting or taking some kind of precautions to avoid the effects of their spells and abilities, then you're not going to be doing too good.
Yeah.
And that might not necessarily mean like, hey, we're gonna put like instant wipe spells in the game where you're just like your whole group is like instantly dead. But like maybe if you're not interrupting something, then this mana drain's hitting your whole group, and now you have to go sit for 5 minutes, right? Like it could hinder your efficiency.
Mm-hmm. What's going on, Brex? We're just wrapping up here. How are you doing? Belfaster said mobs having full kit of class abilities gets out of hand real quick with health damage and inequities. It's a fair point.
Another thing too is also making stuff like these spells a little bit more friendly to use, I guess. You know, I and so, you know, kind of having that some kind of notification, and something not too intrusive, but at least know that there's something to dispel, and when you cast a dispel, it works. Like that's kind of what I mean about making it a little bit more friendly to use.
I was just trying to summarize the statements above. So essentially, recognizing class and knowing their kit is nice, but depending on how they scale, etc., it can get a little bit too powerful. And then there was a third comment of also mobs shouldn't be constrained to the classes and their abilities. Brex asks, do you guys make it so we can CH through walls?
I can create abilities that work through walls. Ali was gracious enough to give us a lot of flexibility in this department, so we can have it. The cast only resolves if you started in the line of sight or ended in the line of sight, or both, or neither.
Maybe you just need to have, maybe you just have to send the healer to use their post-death heals in to eat the death touch. Or, let's see, are you guys planning on using the in-combat, out-of-combat dynamic when it comes to abilities? Or if you can get it off, good for you.
Not at this time. I'm not a big fan of combat states.
Agreed.
Feels artificial.
Word. See, that's very interesting for all sorts of playstyles. Some can and some can't go through walls. The hole's notorious for having CH come up out of nowhere. Yeah, I'm scrolling up. Guys, we are like 10 minutes out from 11. So that's going to be my bedtime. This was a good start. We're going to go through and I think dig into some themes and then try to find specific, maybe a couple, 2-3 specific topics. Inevitably, as we start to talk about actual class design, I think that's where a lot of the passions are going to be and opinions and concerns and shit like that when we talk specifics, I guess. What do you think, Nick?
Sorry, so can you say that one more time?
I think for this we can probably pull 2 or 3 like specific sub themes or topics together and then focus on that. But I think where people are really going to be invested in the discussion are going to be when we're talking about the actual classes.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, like enchanter discussion or whatever, right?
Mm.
Oh yeah, by the way, are we gonna do a vote on the next topic, or what's the next topic?
Good point. Let me look. Let me bring up the document. Plate wearing mages. Maybe one day. Let me find the. At some point, the random should I say like that in response is going to get us in trouble. I think when the audience is much bigger and people are taking everything that comes out of my mouth more seriously, or at all seriously. But for now, just keep saying shit like that. So the additional topics that we had are as follows. We have combat encounters, crafting, classes, unique class traits. Excuse me, we hit classes today. Travel, also banks, and communication, global versus local channels. Trade, overall system, no drop, bind on equip, account bound, trade bags, merchants, etc. Quests, tameable creatures, mounts, and pets, / pack animals. I guess that actually belongs closer to mounts. And then outdoor zones we've covered, or we've discussed at least once. Didn't we? We did. Yes.
Yeah.
Cities, PvP, classic style MMOs, and what does that mean to you? In game. All right. So
Itemization and merch, separate topics. I like that.
Itemization and merch. Okay. Cool. Do you guys, the way we did it last time was the first few to pop up in chat were the ones that we put in a poll. But I tell you what, the first few to pop up in chat rather than have a poll, I'll just pick one. Do you guys have any preferences? Itemization, crafting,
My vote is for encounters.
trade, encounters.
But I don't mind. I'm gonna be around for all these.
So we have 2 votes for itemization, 2 votes for trade. Some of these topics may wind up being a bit smaller than others, so we might be able to do 2 in 1. Exploring the metasphere is not on the list. shipwrecks. 2 votes for encounters. Itemization, man. What am I leaning towards? You know what? It's going to be a silly one. You may not even see this one coming. Just for fun. Cities is a good one. Damn. I was thinking tameable creatures, mounts / pack animals, and pets.
I saw that coming.
Did you? How?
Yeah.
What gave it away?
That you came up with the topic.
What? I came up with many of these topics.
True. But one is more oddly specific than the others.
The trade is pretty damn specific as well. Never gonna be a
Yeah.
beast of burden? Nice. Alright. So, oh, man.
I say we should just go for the tameable creatures. I know you want to.
Maybe it'll be a quick one. Maybe we can get that done fast.
Yeah.
Ties into trade and stuff though. So we'll even stack this.
It may even like cities or something. I don't know. Crafting.
Okay. So let's do that. We'll do that one next, and then we'll vote. The next time you guys will actually. Yep, it'll dip into travel by covering mounts and pack animals and stuff. Yep. That's very true. That's actually where it came up. So.
And it'll be interesting too, because that's kind of more of a deviation from the classic norm. It's kind of thinking about new ideas.
Yeah.
Not new ideas, but you know.
New to kind of the foundation that we're basing off of. But the folks that play like BDO and stuff like that, Bunny's been great about sort of filling me in on utilization and like BDO and a couple others. So, cool. So what we'll do is we'll hit tameable creatures, mounts / pack animals, and pets, which will probably link a bit to travel and link a bit to trade. And also those topics all link back to keeping cities relevant, which is only one aspect of the cities topic, but I do think a very important one. So that will be the next one. I'll post a little mention of the fact that we'll be doing that on Discord. Maybe we'll do it like Wednesday. Today's Monday, so that'll give us a day to do something else tomorrow, and then we'll hit it maybe on Wednesday or Thursday. Thank you everybody for the participation tonight. We'll do something with this. Maybe a little bit more difficult to structure than the other ones, but we'll see. Nick, you've been doing that, so we've got these posted, and we linked it back to the VOD as well. So cool.
Yeah, thanks everybody for the great feedback and ideas.
Yeah. It's always nice to kind of hear what's important to you guys. Mushner said, gotta say I really love and appreciate the fact that you guys are doing these sessions and writing down all these ideas. And we appreciate that you're sitting in here with us and honestly spitballing things with us and talking. It's a lot of fun. So you're welcome. And cool, man. We're gonna bounce out of here and we will see you tomorrow. We'll be probably doing something slightly different. Maybe I'll be poking around on the art side a little bit more. I love this new texture so much. I cannot wait until our zones are like we start to pull together the actual stuff and it starts to look a little bit more representative of the art style that we've been talking about. It's going to be a lot of fun in coming months. So, all right. Nick, did you have something else?
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, I like that we're texturing these little houses and the doors open too, right? So you can go in there and place some NPCs or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And as we start to settle on the actual scale and stuff, I'll make some more houses for you to work with.
Cool.
Cool. All right. See you guys tomorrow.
See you, everybody.